we come now to the 10-minute rule motion. The honourable gentleman is smiling in eager anticipation. Mr. Sammy Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that leave be given to me to bring in a bill to establish an armed forces covenant scheme to make provision about the requirements and obligations upon public authorities and agencies in relation to serving and former members of the United Kingdom's armed forces contained within that scheme, and to establish a means of providing audit and accountability in relation to the performance of the scheme against its objective, to amend the Equality Act 2010 and Section 75 of the Northern Ireland Act 1988 for the connected purposes. Mr. Speaker, our armed forces are one of the institutions that bind the United Kingdom together. The sacrifices that they have made over generations are a common loss that presents us with an obligation towards those who have volunteered to put themselves in harm's way on our behalf. Memorials in every art and part of the United Kingdom stand as a sad testimony to their sacrifices. And for these reasons, the fulfilment of the military covenant should be a cause which demands our wholehearted support. The concept of the covenant is not a new one, but the legacy of the terrorist campaigns in Northern Ireland, the Iraq wars and the Afghanistan conflict have led to a renewed focus upon what it means and how it is to be delivered. The term moral is not one that is rarely used in these postmodernist times, but it is right when the covenant is described as a moral obligation to members of the armed forces and their families. That is exactly what it was, is, and forever will be. Therefore, it is an obligation that should be fulfilled in letter and in spirit across the United Kingdom. Sadly, it is not, and that is why I present this bill today. Could at this point, Mr. Speaker, pay tribute to Mrs. Brenda Hale, a DUP member of the Northern Ireland Assembly, who lost her husband in Afghanistan and who has championed this cause on behalf of all servicemen and ex-servicemen and women in Northern Ireland. In Northern Ireland, by the government's own admission, the military covenant is not being fulfilled. The Northern Ireland office has previously claimed that 93% of it is being fulfilled. That figure has not been independently assessed, and when I outline some of the problems, members may wonder how the NIO reached that figure. However, for the moment, let us take their word and ask two simple questions. When in battle, does a member of the Royal Air Force, the Royal Navy or the Army risk 93% for their country and their comrades? Of course they don't. They risk everything. They risk all. When in battle, does a member of the Royal Air Force, the Royal Navy or the Army who comes from Northern Ireland or lives in Northern Ireland only risk 93%, while those in Great Britain risk 100%? Of course they don't. They risk all just the same as servicemen based in other parts of the United Kingdom. So where are we failing in our moral obligation? There are four primary areas in which the covenant is not being fulfilled. Firstly, when it comes to priority of treatment in the National Health Service for wounded and injured and sick veterans. Subject to the clinical needs of others, wounded, injured and sick veterans are entitled to priority National Health Service treatment in GB for conditions which are attributable to their service in the armed forces. Priority treatment is not available in the same way for veterans in Northern Ireland, not only because veterans are often reluctant to declare previous armed forces service on security grounds, but as a result of restrictions contained in Section 75 of the Northern Ireland Act 1988. Secondly, when it comes to priority for social housing, Local authorities and GB are required to consider service leavers as if they have local connection and be given points accordingly. In addition, further priority is often given to veterans on the waiting list for social housing in GB. Again, this is not the case in Northern Ireland because of Section 75 of the Northern Ireland Act 1998. Thirdly, provision for IVF treatment is not available on the same grounds. For veterans who require IVF treatment because of service-related injuries, there are 3 entitlement cycles in Scotland and England. Only one is available in Northern Ireland, and the cost of each cycle costs about £3,500, although the numbers are small. And fourthly, when it comes to the waiving of domestic rates or council tax for unoccupied property, in GB, local authorities offer a 50% discount on council tax in respect of empty properties owned by service personnel who live in MOD property elsewhere as a result of serving in the armed forces. This valuable concession is not available in Northern Ireland. Whenever members see the issues such as important as health and housing as being failures, it's legitimate to question how a failure rate of only 7% is arrived at by the Northern Ireland Office. This failure of delivery is not simply one of a slow or disconnected bureaucracy, but due to the particular circumstances in Northern Ireland and in particular Section 75 requirements, which requires that key groups are entitled to protection, and it is now interpreted as a legal barrier to the implementation of the Covenant in Northern Ireland. In Lord Ashcroft's review of the Veterans Policy commissioned by the Prime Minister, he recognised this barrier and proposed that Parliament amend Section 75 to enable service leavers and veterans to receive the recognition and provision they deserve. Neither the Ministry of Defence nor the Northern Ireland Office has acted on this recommendation so far, despite the fact that Section 75 was amended to include travellers. And I must say it's hard to understand why members of the travelling community should be regarded by the Northern Ireland Office as being more worthy of preferential treatment than members of the armed forces. That is why I and my party have chosen to, through this bill, to highlight the inaction. Lord Ashcroft's proposal would fit with the approach taken in the United States of America. In a landmark Civil Rights Act in '64, it provided specific protection for government action for veterans. Alternatively, there is a proposal from my party's Westminster Manifesto that rather than exempt action for veterans from Section 75, they should be afforded the same protections as Section 75 groups. I accept that this proposal does not have universal acceptance in Northern Ireland, and no doubt is one of the reasons for the reluctance of the NIO to bring forward changes to the Act. Sinn Féin and the SDLP have opposed changes needed to enable the full implementation of the Military Covenant, and many find their attitude disappointing and disgraceful. Those signing up to join the armed forces do not exclusively come from the Protestant and Unionist community. The services recruit from all areas, faiths and political allegiances in Northern Ireland, yet both Sinn Féin and the SDLP seem happy to abandon them. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, a moral obligation is not met unless it is wholeheartedly and fully met. In Northern Ireland it is not being met, and thus in the United Kingdom as a whole the moral obligation is not being fulfilled. Today I have shown the failures, I have offered this House solutions. This Parliament must now commit itself and act to fulfil the moral obligations to members of the armed forces and their families.
Order. The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many as other opinions say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Mr. David Nuttall, Kate Hoey, Jim Shannon, Gordon Henderson, Mr. Gregory Campbell, Mr. Jeffrey Donaldson, Tom Tugendhat, Mr. Nigel Dodds, and Ian Paisley.
And yourself. Indeed. Mr. Sammy Wilson.
Armed Forces Covenant Implementation United Kingdom Bill.
Second reading what day?
29th of January 2016. 29th of January.
29th of January 2016. Thank you.